Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom, the show where we delve into the inner workings of our bodies with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, only with less ticking and more talking. I'm Ethan Foster, self-appointed observer of the human condition.
And I'm Alara Skye, your favorite quick-witted navigator through the labyrinth of health. Always ready with a punchline and a deep thought. Today, we're exploring fatty liver disease. If that sounds like a dull trip to the butcher's shop, stick around. There's more to it than meets the eye.
Let's get rolling. We're here to figure out why so many folks in the US are experiencing issues with their livers. The numbers are a bit staggering. Apparently 42% of American adults have fatty liver disease. That's 4 in 10.
Which is almost half. And half is a pretty big chunk. It's like if you and a friend are eating a large pizza and they take 4 slices. You'd definitely notice.
I'd notice because I'd be left with fewer slices. And I'm sensitive about that sort of thing.
We'll have to talk about your sensitivity over pizza distribution later. Let's define the 2 big categories we're dealing with. Metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease, commonly called MASLD, and alcoholic fatty liver disease, or ALD.
Right. But Dr. Mercola points out that, in essence, these two share the same root problem, the livers being clogged by fat. The main difference is that one is directly tied to excess alcohol consumption, while the other ties back to metabolic dysfunction. And to clarify, some folks may have heard it called NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That's been replaced more recently with MASLD. New name, same problem.
The rebranding apparently draws attention to the real culprit, metabolic imbalance, which is fancy speak for your body's system for handling food, fats, and sugar is off-kilter. And let's not forget that kids aren't immune. A surprising number, around 9.6%, of children ages 2 to 19 now show signs of fatty liver. It goes up to 17.3% for those between 15 and 19.
Whenever I see statistics involving young children, I find it alarming. It's like finding out preschoolers are watching film noir. You don't expect them to be exposed to these adult conditions so early.
Precisely. So how do we end up with a fatty liver? Picture your liver as a factory. It's there to process toxins and produce substances we need for digestion and other bodily tasks. But if it's overwhelmed with fat, the machinery gets gunked up. It can't do its job efficiently. And early on, there aren't a lot of symptoms, which is why people might walk around not realizing their livers are basically stressed out employees on the verge of a strike.
And in the case of ALD, alcoholic fatty liver disease, the reason is more straightforward. Drink too much and your liver's forced to work overtime. Overwhelming your liver with alcohol can lead from simple fat accumulation to inflammation and ultimately cirrhosis. This is the stage where the liver's scarred and has a hard time functioning.
To clarify those drinking too much stats, for men, having more than 15 drinks weekly puts you in that hazardous territory. For women, the threshold is 8 drinks a week. Some might be thinking, that's not too high, but if you break it down per day, it's easy to see how a daily habit might tip you toward trouble.
Now, we've established that fatty liver disease is increasingly common. Are we going to blame this on the classic American diet?
By classic American diet, you mean stuff that comes in bright packaging, loaded with ingredients we can't pronounce, plus sodas, fast food, and endless sugar. Yes, indeed. Processed foods take center stage. That alone can wreak havoc on the body, especially the liver.
We have a real talent in this country for perfecting the science of cheap, tasty foods that have about as much nutritional value as a vintage shoe. But they make them colorful and convenient, so in they go, right into the grocery cart. And then our livers pay the price.
Especially with obesity levels rising. Since obesity is strongly tied to metabolic issues, it's no surprise that so many people end up with fatty liver. Obesity leads to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance leads to higher blood sugar levels. Your body makes more insulin to compensate. Extra insulin promotes fat storage in the liver. Next thing you know, you're living inside this metabolic traffic jam.
And you don't even get a car horn to express your frustration. Let's pivot for a moment to the new name, MASLD. It's not just a rebrand to keep medical folks on their toes. It's to put a spotlight on the metabolic route. When we talk about MASLD, we're talking about a spectrum. It starts at simple fat accumulation, steatosis, and can progress to MASH if it becomes inflamed.
MASH used to be called NASH. You know medical acronyms, changing like runway fashions. If it's inflamed, your liver gets damaged. That damage is what can lead to scarring or cirrhosis.
In children, it's especially concerning because if their livers start taking damage early, it sets them up for a lifetime of complications. And, as you said before, it often comes down to the usual suspects. Too much sugar, too many processed foods, and an increasing rate of childhood obesity.
Let's shift to the big question people might ask. How do I know if I have it, and what can I do about it? Because if it's silent in its early stages, that's tricky.
Generally, doctors can run blood tests for liver enzymes. If those come back elevated, it might raise a red flag. Imaging tests like ultrasounds, CT scans, or MRIs can show fat in the liver. And in some extreme cases, a biopsy might be necessary, though that's not as common these days. There's also something called a fibroscan, which checks for liver stiffness, indicating possible scarring.
But that's just diagnosing. The real magic is in prevention and intervention. It comes down to lifestyle, focusing on unprocessed, whole foods, and limiting sugary drinks and refined carbs. Also, staying active helps with insulin sensitivity, which helps the liver. The big tip is that losing about 7% to 10% of your body weight can make a massive difference in your liver's health.
So if someone weighs 200 pounds, that's around 14 to 20 pounds to lose. Not a small amount, but definitely doable over time. And the improvement is pretty remarkable once you get rid of that extra fat hanging around your midsection and in your liver.
Precisely. Also, there are certain supplements that might support liver health. Things like choline, NAC, vitamin B12, folate. But the star of the show is always going to be your daily choices: the food you buy, the exercise you do, and how you manage stress.
Speaking of stress, if you're dealing with other conditions like type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, or polycystic ovary syndrome, you might have a higher risk of fatty liver disease. Not exactly a party favor.
More like an unwelcome houseguest. Type 2 diabetes itself is closely linked to obesity and insulin resistance, so if you've got that, your risk for fatty liver shoots up. It's a metabolic chain reaction.
So, let's paint a scenario. Suppose I'm someone who's prone to ordering takeout. Lots of fried foods, lots of sugary drinks. I have a spare tire around my midsection that I've named Gordon. I'm not working out much. Where does that path likely lead?
Straight to the land of fatty liver. Possibly MASH LD if alcohol's not involved. Over time, if that kind of diet persists and your weight remains high, it might move further into inflamed territory, MASH. And if you keep ignoring it, you could be looking at cirrhosis.
But maybe I say, hey, I want to fix this. I start cooking my own meals. I swap out soda for water. I incorporate a daily walk or some kind of exercise routine. My weight starts coming down slowly, maybe a pound or two a week. That changes the trajectory.
Exactly. It's not an overnight miracle. You won't see a banner across your living room proclaiming, "Hooray, your liver is now pristine." But internally, you'll be clearing out fat from that overworked factory. After a while, the liver can recover.
Let's not forget how big a role social and cultural factors play here too. Hispanic adults in particular have a higher prevalence, around 47%. Could be genetics, could be dietary patterns, or a mix. The broader takeaway is that no demographic is immune, but certain groups get hit especially hard.
And we know that when a lifestyle becomes deeply ingrained, certain family eating habits, for instance, it's challenging to shift. But awareness is a big step. If you know the stakes are this high, you're more likely to be mindful about that second or third soda of the day.
Let's circle back to alcohol for a moment. Alcoholic fatty liver disease is considered a distinct category because of the direct effect alcohol has on your liver. But, ironically, the end result is basically the same condition: a liver clogged with fat.
That's right. There's a line from simple steatosis to hepatitis to cirrhosis. Once you cross into cirrhosis territory, the damage is often irreversible. But if you catch it early, simply cutting back or stopping alcohol can reverse the fatty accumulation.
It's one of the marvels of the human body. The liver is quite resilient. But even a champion can only take so many hits. If you keep hammering away at it, it'll eventually fold.
So, for anyone listening, this is not about moral judgments or guilting people. It's more about letting you know your liver's your friend. Treat it well. Help it do its job.
Let's talk a bit more about what goes wrong at the cellular level. Fat accumulates in the liver cells, and you get that dreaded inflammation. Inflammation is the sign that your immune system's noticing something's off and launching an attack, like little firefighters running to a blaze.
Only if the blaze is constantly fueled by bad habits, those firefighters end up making a permanent home in your liver, leaving behind scar tissue. And your poor liver is basically shouting, "I can't keep up with all this." That's where you reach the advanced stages.
Another interesting angle is the link to cardiovascular health. Fatty liver disease ups your risk for heart disease and stroke. It's like a 2-for-1 deal, except nobody wants that kind of deal.
Not a bargain at all. The reason is that these metabolic issues don't stay in the liver's backyard. They spill out into the rest of your body, messing with blood vessels, blood pressure, insulin levels. Everything's interconnected.
So if we can dial down the factors that cause fatty liver, we might also prevent some heart trouble. It's a holistic approach. Doesn't that sound like something you'd be on board with, Alara?
Count me in. I love synergy. Reduce one risk, reduce them all. Now, for anyone confused about diagnosing methods, a typical scenario is you go for a routine blood test, your liver enzymes come back elevated, your doc says, that's interesting. You go for an ultrasound or MRI, and they see that your liver's a bit fatty. That usually sparks the conversation about cleaning up your diet, shedding some pounds, and possibly limiting or eliminating alcohol.
And if we can avoid the biopsy, that's better because it's more invasive, though sometimes it's necessary if something's unclear. But often these non-invasive measures are enough to sound the alarm.
Exactly. Now, if you're listening and you feel like you might be on the cusp of trouble with your liver, maybe you're carrying extra weight, maybe your diet is questionable, It's wise to consider some supportive strategies. This is your biggest internal organ. Show it some love.
Love in the form of fewer processed foods and less sugar. Maybe that's not as exciting as a glittery heart-shaped Valentine, but trust me, your liver will be thrilled.
We want to emphasize that it's not only sugar. There's also a huge culprit, vegetable oils. They're in so many processed items. These oils can promote inflammation. So swapping them out for healthier fats, like butter, ghee, or tallow, could help lighten the liver's workload.
For some folks, that might sound odd. They've heard for years that vegetable oils are heart-healthy, but that's an oversimplification. Many of these oils go through heavy processing, and they don't do your body any favors.
Then there's the question of carbohydrates. The suggestion is to focus on whole food carbs, fruits, and well-cooked veggies, while limiting refined carbs. That's key to maintaining stable blood sugar, which translates to less fat accumulation in the liver.
Let's do a quick rundown of the main lifestyle changes that can help. Cleaning up the diet, minimal processed foods, sugary beverages, and junk. Adopting healthier fats. Avoid those inflammatory vegetable oils. Watching carb intake and ensuring you're getting them from whole food sources. Exercising regularly. Even a brisk 30-minute walk most days can shift the tide. Aiming for a moderate weight loss goal if you're overweight. Around 7% to 10%. Yes, those steps alone could be game changers. And once you start reaping benefits in your energy levels and overall well-being, you'll likely want to keep going. People find that once they see tangible results, like losing a few pounds or feeling more energetic, it's motivating. It's a virtuous cycle, right? Feeling better makes it easier to keep making good choices, which in turn makes you feel even better. Next thing you know, your clothes fit nicely, your blood work improves, and your liver's humming a happy tune in the background.
To me, that's a far cry from the initial scenario of a silent, overworked organ you never really thought about. Which is ironically how the liver gets in trouble in the first place. Nobody thinks about it until it starts screaming.
Let's also mention that if you do enjoy the occasional drink, it doesn't automatically doom your liver. It's the consistent heavy usage that poses the real risk. Everything in moderation. If you already have underlying liver problems, the situation is more pressing.
Exactly. For those folks, even moderate drinking can be risky, so it's best to be aware of your condition. But for many, the main issue isn't the occasional glass of wine. It's the day-to-day eating patterns, sugary drinks, lack of movement, and creeping waistlines.
Let's pivot momentarily to the more serious complications. Just to drive home the point, if fatty liver disease progresses far enough, cirrhosis is on the table. That's where normal liver tissue is replaced with scar tissue. Once that happens, your liver can't function well, and your risk of liver failure, cancer, and other nasties skyrockets.
Cirrhosis is no joke. It can cause fluid buildup, confusion from toxins that the liver can't filter, and bleeding issues. You do not want to go down that path. The worst part is many folks find out only when it's too late to reverse it.
That's why we keep emphasizing catch it early. It's not about doom and gloom, but about shifting course before you reach the point of no return. The good news is that the earlier in the process you make changes, the better your odds of restoring normal liver function.
So if we were to sum up the spirit of Dr. Mercola's perspective here, it's that these different fatty liver conditions, MASLD, NAFLD, ALD, are basically the same disease wearing different outfits, shaped by either metabolic issues or alcohol. And the solution is to address the root cause rather than just slapping a bandage on it.
Precisely. Also, it's nice that the new name, MASLD, highlights the metabolic angle. That's the root problem for a lot of folks, a mismatch between their lifestyle habits and their body's capacity to handle them.
I think we've just about covered the big points. Let's do a quick final reflection, Ethan. Any major takeaway you want to highlight?
That your liver is a superhero. It can handle a lot, but it's not invincible. Appreciate it, feed it well, give it a little daily exercise to keep everything functioning, and if you drink, keep it moderate.
Well said. For me, I'd say knowledge is power. Knowing that almost half of US adults may be dealing with this means it's a widespread issue that deserves attention. But it doesn't need to be a life sentence. With the right diet and lifestyle shifts, you can lighten the load on that unsung hero in your abdomen.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. Remember, if your liver could talk, it might say, if you feed me too much junk, I'll have to file for overtime. And trust me, that's the last thing we want, an overworked liver union.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Until next time, this is Alara Sky.
And Ethan Foster.
Wishing you a healthy liver, a happy metabolism, and maybe a slightly smaller pizza slice ratio if you're sharing with Ethan.
Guilty as charged. Till next time, folks, take care of yourselves, and your liver will thank you.